Most kids don't go looking for porn. Porn goes looking for them, and most parents don't realize it until it's already shaping their child's brain. Whether you're outside grilling, changing diapers, or just trying to catch a breath, the Young Dad Podcast is your spot for real conversations about fatherhood, manhood, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jay, and I sit down with dads, experts, and everyday people to talk about the joys, the struggles, and the lessons that come with raising kids and building a meaningful life. From mental health and relationships to faith, family, and the funny stuff only dads understand. YDP is here to remind you that you're not doing this alone. So grab a juice box, grab a snack, kick back, and join the conversation because fatherhood doesn't come with a manual, but it should come with a podcast. This is one of those conversations dads don't usually have until there's already a problem, and by then the damage feels overwhelming. Chris, what's the earliest moment parents usually miss when it comes to porn exposure, and why don't we see it as a warning sign?
One of the first things that a lot of parents seem to kind of let fly under the radar is like this increased sense of secrecy, particularly around people's devices. Like we're talking about a generation that has a connection to screens that maybe our generation or generations older simply cannot relate to,
Mm-hmm.
a child stumbles onto something like pornography. One of the first things that tends to happen, one of the first things that makes an antenna start to wobble is that increased sense of secrecy.
Makes sense. Because, yeah, you don't want to admit it to your parents, right? You don't want to say, hey, look what I just found.
Yeah.
It's more so, oh, that was weird, and kind of move on and be like, oh, that was actually something, especially for boys, right? It's like, that was a boob. It's like, oh, was that a nipple? But Chris, let me introduce you, and then we'll jump really into the episode today. In today's
Yeah.
episode, if you couldn't guess, you already know the topic. So if you have sensitive ears, kids in the room, maybe don't. Um, We're gonna be throwing around that word a lot. We're gonna be throwing around other similar terms, so make sure that you're aware of who's around. If you don't want anyone looking at you weird at work while you're listening to this, or if you're an Uber driver, maybe skip this one for later. But today's guest is Chris Rogers, educator, coach, and head coach of the Rebooted Teen and Rebooted Teen Parent Program. Chris works directly with teens and families navigating compulsive sexual behaviors in a digital world, and he brings both professional expertise and lived experience into the work. His focus isn't shame, it's systems, community, and tools that actually help families heal and move forward. And so we're going to do a lot of education and then a lot of practical tools in today's episode. So I hope you stay tuned. I hope you enjoy. But let's jump into kind of the core of the episode now that we kind of got the introductions and all the stuff out of the way. And we have people interested. Um, when we're talking about porn, a lot of parents freeze because they think this conversation is about morality, which partially can be, but it is a parenting issue, not so much a moral failure. So why is porn exposure primarily a developmental and neurological issue for kids, not a character flaw?
That is such a beautiful question, man, because when it comes to this particular sect of compulsive behaviors, and you articulated it beautifully, it absolutely can be, a spiritual issue, as in the spirit is included and is certainly
Mhm,
affected. But what we're really talking about most like specifically is a brain issue.
mhm,
We've developed a pattern that involves us, acting out on a behavior, for some, if it's driven the car of their decision making, maybe they've fallen on hard times, maybe it's affected their relationships, maybe it's affected their own self-esteem and their
mhm,
own set of expectations for the way they should be or how they should show up in a relationship, and where communication kind of takes a back seat in favor of, immediate validation, right?
mhm,
So what we're really talking about is something that is called the Coolidge effect. And this is kind of what makes something like porn addiction really its own beast. There's this experiment that was done. I forget the year off the top of my head, but long story short, there was this experiment done with lab rats. So basically, what happened was there was a male rat and a female rat, and they mated. And essentially, over time, the male rat kind of lost interest in the female rat. So what they
mhm,
did was they took the female rat out of the cage and replaced it with a new female rat. And all of a sudden, interest was re-piqued by the male rat. So they made it, and then same story. Eventually, the male lost interest, so they replaced the female rat with another, and it became a revolving door. The experiment went on to conclude that we have, since we're not that far off DNA wise with rats, which is why we do experiments with them, there is an addiction and fascination with novelty, like that never ending door, like that endless supply, right? Like there's
Mhm.
always something new. As soon as we find ourselves bored or disinterested, boom, the moment the sense of newness is introduced, it's like, ooh, there's the spark again. There's this thing again. This leads us toward like compulsivity when it comes to even things like social media, but particularly when you add a sexual element to it. It's a certain cocktail of chemicals that once we take a swig, we want that hit once again. I can totally nerd out on that, but that's really what we're talking about. It's that novelty aspect.
Yeah, it's like it's about the chase, right? Not so much about
Yeah,
the prize. It's kinda like, if you think about it in, like, TV terms, it's kinda like you think of Barney Stinson, right? Think of Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. He was constantly chasing. He was constantly chasing, but once he got it, it was like, move on.
right.
And then move on to the next one, and then try to make it a little bit harder, raise the stakes a little bit, and nail it, move on. Same thing again. Try a different way, try a different play, try a different
Right.
approach, and nail it, or until you nail it, keep doing it, right? And then, like, drag other people into it, do multiple different scenarios, make it different fun. I mean, there's, like, 10 seasons of him doing this. Um, and then the
You think
same
you get it by now, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can see it throughout his, like, attempted relationships, like, he wanted to, he really wanted to, but he got to the point to where he just got not bored, but, like, disinterested. Uh
And that's the whole thing. It's the chase. And if you even think about it, like, it's important you use that word, it's the chase, because here's the
Mhm,
deal too. It's not just the website. It's not just the behavior itself. It's the buildup. This is what kind of separates something like porn addiction from something like a substance-based addiction. In technical terms, this is what we call a behavioral addiction, yes, but a process addiction. So just to break it down. So it's the buildup, right? Because anybody who's, kind of fallen on hard times when it comes to, oh, I've kind of developed like a compulsive relationship with something like porn or sex or masturbation, something in that area, it's the search, right? It's the buildup, it's the anticipation. Like someone, will spend an unprecedented amount of time until they find the perfect clip, the perfect picture, the perfect whatever, until they finally, do what it is that they do. They will wait. It's the buildup. It's the
mhm,
process. So it truly is, the thrill of the chase. But what I tend to do, so like you said, I have this program, two programs actually. One is called Rebooted Teen, and it's literally a coaching program for people, that are either in high school or middle school right now or just graduating. And this is my crew, like
mhm,
before I became a full time coach, this is my people. I was a music teacher for like the better part of a decade in New York City. So this is my demographic. But what I also have is what's called the Rebooted Teen Parent Program, which is literally for parents, guardians, caregivers to give them some tools, some techniques, just some conversation starters. Because I mean, we've all heard of like the birds and the bees type of talk. And understandably, when it comes to whether it is talking about sex or whether it is talking about porn, it can understandably for most feel a little awkward, a little
mhm,
uncomfortable. Like, how do I start this type of conversation without making them feel weird or without coming across as weird like the dad from American Pie or something, right? Like, how do I do this type of talk and still, maintain that sense of, oh, wait, it's not me versus you. It's me versus it's us together versus the problem. You
mhm.
know, you're the captain of the team. You're still the head of the household, but you're still on a team.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really what we emphasize. And that's the mindset and heart really behind those programs.
Yeah, no, and I love that because if we're thinking about it kind of at 2 stages here, we think about, like, silence, and it's like, okay, well, if we just don't talk about it or we avoid it, then the issue's probably gonna go away, but honestly, what that creates is more damage and exposure, and so, many parents avoid the conversation because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So you mentioned already that it's a it's a behavior-based compulsion, and correct me if I said that wrong. Um, but so what happens, like, physiologically when kids learn about sex from the internet instead of their parent?
Mm. So what happens neurologically is actually really, really interesting because we throw the word dopamine around, right? That's
Mhm,
the feel good hormone. That's the hormone that's behind motivation,
mhm,
right? It's that feel good thing. Because if the chemical dopamine wasn't involved, then maybe, we wouldn't have any compulsive behaviors at all, right? But then there's also something called norepinephrine. I'm going to get real nerdy
yeah,
and
go
then we're
for
going
it.
to bring it back to practical in a second.
Yeah, go
But
for it.
norepinephrine. So basically, it's the thing in your brain that classifies something as important. There's this sensation that's known as euphoric recall. So basically, what that means is, it's like you're going through that process, right? There's the buildup, and then there's the peak. There's that
Mhm,
euphoric moment. And then that's the thing that draws us back toward a particular behavior. We're not remembering kind of like what we may have been masking or what we may have been running away from or the dis-ease, hi cat, or the dis-ease that kind of like led to us making that decision. And we're certainly not thinking about the adverse consequences. We're only
mhm,
remembering that rush, that spark, that high, right? So that's euphoric recall. But there's also an adrenal response. Like there's adrenaline involved, right? Part of that
mhm,
process, part of that buildup. But then there's also like endogenous opiates that are produced, like opiates, like literally like painkillers, essentially. It's like when you go to a store or on the most desperate of circumstances, what you can buy off the street, you naturally produce inside your body, you know?
mhm,
And it's important to know that, yes, we can speak about the morality piece in a second, but like we said, this is a brain issue. And the brain is not designed to handle that excess stimulation with that particular, cocktail of chemicals, especially when consumed regularly.
mhm,
So, as far as oh, like you said earlier, maybe it's a phase and, they'll learn about sex or porn eventually. And my response might be, why not have them learn and know about it from you? In the world of influencers, you as a father, you as a parent are their original influencer, right? So that's really what the program is for. We're going to dive into the science, but we're also going to dive into some practical steps that you can take and remember what the mission is. Like I said, man, it's not just about me versus you. Like, I'm sure we've all been there in some way, or at least many of us have. Like, you watched porn. Like, I thought I raised you better than this. How could you watch this filth? Don't do this, you know? And I don't know who needs to hear this. If you lead with shame, they will stay the same.
yeah,
That's how it works. So this is the type of stuff that we talk about. But yeah, again, I really just want to emphasize, just to really put a bow on it, this is a brain issue, not simply or rather only a heart issue. While it is involved, we're talking about how excessive exposure, really no matter how old you are, but especially as your brain is literally still growing, it's important to have these types of conversations sooner as opposed to putting it off till later until it becomes too late.
absolutely. And so all that science and stuff that you said, can you break it down like I'm 5?
Okay, great. Yes. So, what brings someone closer to this type of behavior to the point where it becomes compulsive? And when I say compulsive, I'm literally meaning you ever have that moment where it's like, I don't really want to do this, but I find myself doing it anyway. Like it just
Mhm,
kind of comes muscle memory.
yeah,
There's no thought involved. It's like your body kind of goes on autopilot. So that's how something becomes compulsive when there really is no thought involved, where the body kind of has a mind of its own. Now, the way it affects the brain, again, especially when you're super young, there is that rush of excitement. There is that rush of curiosity and that buildup an adrenal response that they're not physically prepared to handle yet. It's like a flamethrower of stimulation when all we can handle right now is a candle of warmth, right?
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, like, you think about it, right? Like, there's this, theory called, like, Jean Piaget, this was kinda, like, beaten into me in my teaching days, like, different stages of development.
yeah,
You're
Piaget's
still
stages of development, yeah,
So
I have
you're
a master's in psychology. I'm a mental health clinician, so yeah, I'm familiar with it, but audience may not
so
be.
so there you go. So in which case I won't, over explain.
Yeah,
So the primary point is, meeting a child where they're at when they're
yeah.
still discovering the world for the first time.
Mhm.
So if they're exposed to something like porn at an early age, we start to misconstrue or conflate sex for intimacy, right? Where one might include the other, but the reality is they're not mutually exclusive. They're not synonymous, right? So it's really conversations like that, like, who are you? What do you want? And learning over time how to make decisions based on your values. Now, again, it's our role as fathers, it's our role as caregivers and guardians to, again, be the captain of the team, lead, but also instill that culture of curiosity. What I mean by that is I'm going to say something a little strange, but stay with me. When it comes to compulsive behaviors, when it comes to this nasty word like addiction, it's not the thing, but the place from which it's coming from. It's not the behavior. It's not just the porn. It's the place that leads us there. Like, what's that inner magnet that draws us closer to this particular behavior, especially when it may have been proven to be unhealthy for us? What we're going to do is put a magnifying glass on that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, what's the feeling that you might be having that you might not feel comfortable to share? Like, what's that thing that you might be trying to either run away from or medicate or mask? What's the thing that you're trying to ease through this particular behavior? That's the target.
Yep. No, and I love that because all behaviors typically are essentially a way of communicating a need, right? Like, I need something here. Like, there's an unmet need through this behavior that I'm displaying. Like, if I was cussing and swearing at you this whole time, Chris, and obviously I have some kind of thing going on, right? It would be very obvious. Um, but sometimes it's not as obvious. And what I guess to kind of dive into that, and then I want to go back a couple things too. But what are like, especially for teenagers, like what are those unmet needs? Or for like not even I don't want to say teenagers because it can start with preteens, 8, 9, 10, 11. uh, the exposure happens younger and younger, especially with phones and just limitless access. But what are those unmet needs that kinda keep kids going back?
Sure. I mean, that sense of immediacy for sure.
Yeah, instant gratification.
Instant gratification, that sense of feeling safe straight up.
Mhm.
It's like if there's some sort of dis-ease, if there's some sort of weirdness inside, like, can I talk to mom about this? Can I talk to dad about this? Whereas you interact with a screen, I mean, here we are in the age of AI, right?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah,
something on your
90% of the Super Bowl commercials were AI.
hello. I mean, that's a whole different thing. But, here we are. It's like we're in a culture now that many, not all, but many people will sometimes use something like Chat GPT as their therapist,
Yeah,
you know, which is a whole other thing. I'm
which is a
sure you,
whole other conversation. I have so many opinions on that. I have so many
yeah.
opinions.
But the overall,
You can't
yeah,
replace therapy with AI.
exactly.
It's a great sounding board, but a lot of times ChatGPT does lead you back to talking to an actual therapist or does recommend you to talk to a therapist. That's a whole other rabbit hole. But I mean, I use ChatGPT a ton. I use it a ton. I use it for to help prep my podcast episodes because I have all my prompts and it organizes it and it spits it out in the way I like it. And then I just edit it and it's super quick. I can do a week's worth in 20 minutes
Exactly.
and all the fun stuff, right? I use it for work like almost every day because it's like, okay, maybe I'm typing a message really fast, but I want it to sound like a real manager sent it or something. So I'm having it rewrite things for a better tone or approach or delivery, depending on what audience I'm talking to. And it's a great tool. It's a fantastic tool. It should absolutely be used, but it shouldn't be used for things that you need a person for. It can't fully it can automate a lot of things, it can help with a lot of things, but it can't replace people. But anyways, continue.
Yeah, but on that same wavelength, again, in a similar way, what someone who is 8 or 9 doesn't know that we know is exactly what you said. There are
Exactly.
certain things that, something like AI or we'll ease more into like the porn territory in a second, but there is a sense of humanity right? There's a sense of relationship that you won't find with something you'll find on the internet. But again, someone who's 8 or 9 discovering everything in the world for the first time, they don't know that yet. It's not
Yeah,
their fault, right?
yeah,
They are exposed to the world that they were born into, which
yeah.
sort of leads to another thing as far as what do we do as far as how to help them out with kind of showing them what's real, what isn't. Using using the sentence starter, "When I was your age." We know with all the best intentions in the world, like, "Hey, man, like, I know what it was like to be a teen too. Adolescence sucks. Like, I've been there, you know?" But it doesn't fit or is not as relevant as we might think it is. Because think
Mhm,
of it this way, I really had my perspective switched when I was teaching. I taught in the middle of the pandemic. I taught high school, middle school, elementary, the whole gamut, right?
mhm.
But I especially with my younger kids, I noticed a switch when we finally went back to the building and stuff. Here we are essentially through this time period teaching students
Mhm.
as young as the ages we mentioned that here is everything that you could possibly need or want on a screen. Here's where school is going to be. Here's where
Yeah.
all the information's gonna be. Here's where your entertainment's gonna be. Here's where your community is going to be. That's when we spoke to friends and family,
Yeah,
and this.
everything comes from this. You do this for everything. This is your entire life is built into this one thing, which is
Right.
massively convenient, right? But massively dangerous at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I where you're going with this too is like what we don't even realize is like a lot of kids, not a lot, but probably a surprising number of kids. I don't know the actual numbers. I'm sure I could put it into ChatGPT and it'll tell me. But like a surprising amount of people, even adults, especially adult men, have AI girlfriends. And it's like it goes back to like that statistic, like 80% of the women are dating 20% of the men, and 80% of the men are dating 20% of the women.
Interesting.
Right. So there's a lot of men that aren't dating. And so I mean it goes exactly back to this conversation, right? And it's just what it led to over time. It's like it leads to AI girlfriends because you can't get anything else, or there's not the exposure, right, to people, or there's just poor habits, or the expectations were rewritten and it was just easier, whatever it leads to, right? However it got to that point, but it's a real thing, right? An 8-year-old could have an AI girlfriend and think it's the coolest thing, right?
It's, everything I could ever want, like you said, kind of like a one-stop shop for everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
But on the piece that you said, I mean, just, full transparency, what I do now, beyond these programs, I coach men
Mhm.
every single day from all around the world, and this is, a new, developing trend, within the last year, but I'd say really within the last 2 or 3. It started
Mhm.
to, like, grow into more of a, for lack of a better term, mainstream thing. Yeah, it's, on the piece of, a man can't, date anyone else or get anywhere else, and while there might be some truth in that, perhaps, that sense of intimacy that they
Mhm.
want,
Yeah.
they've been so conditioned to find it in this one particular place. Then once you add the element of artificial intelligence, there's that actual communication aspect to it.
Yeah,
So
and
not
it's
only is
feeding the
there that.
brain in all the ways that the brain needs to be fed for it to be sustained.
Right. There's that visual aspect, but then there's also that emotional aspect. Wow, someone's actually speaking to me and not judging me,
Yeah.
right? There's that sense of intimacy and sex that has kind of been like the lines have kind of been blurred, and it truly is something that, certainly needs to be addressed because while the way I would speak to somebody about it, it's certainly not from a place of judgment, like, "You're doing these things wrong." Really, my role as a coach, I can't force someone
Really,
to
it's
do it.
a it's a place of concern,
It's a
honestly.
place of
It
concern.
Yeah, because, I mean, they've been influenced, right? Kinda going back to that point of, like, influence, like, we're our children's first influence, right? We should be having on age-appropriate conversations with them, using age-appropriate language, an ongoing conversation versus just one big talk when they turn 13. Right, because 'cause they're gonna get exposed to it at 8, 9, 10 years old, especially depending on the state that you live in. Some states are a little bit more hypersexualized depending on how and this may be controversial, but depending on how blue they are or red, it goes both ways, but
Those
depending on the school board, school district, but a lot of times from my knowledge, it's a lot of blue that really leans into this. I mean, in Washington State, they were trying to push a LBGTQ plus, curriculum into elementary schools, which made no sense. Luckily, our district that I live in didn't adopt it, so it wasn't introduced into our district. They were able to check like the bare minimum of boxes to satisfy the requirements, but not able to take on the whole. They didn't take on the whole thing. But then you see things happen like your community, like that just push it over the edge. Like there's like our society is just hypersexualized. Like
Yeah.
Pride, in June, you go to a pride celebration and there's dudes in dresses, there's cross dressers, there's trans, there's dicks out, tits out, everything's out, right? And there's kids there. There's kids there. There are people that are genuinely taking their kids there to have a good time. Um, but again, it's not appropriate for children, right? But I mean, they're getting exposed younger and younger and younger and younger. And
For
it's like you
sure.
said, there has to be a calm curiosity. We have to be calm and curious versus shaming, because shaming is just going to lead them back to it. The shame cycle, they're just going to create a shame cycle and it's going to lead them right back to it over and over and over again. Anytime they feel shame, if you shame them for it, anyone that shames them for anything else is going to lead them right back to the same thing. And
Um,
that's going to be where they're doing it from, and we have to lead with that calm curiosity over the interrogation aspect more so,
right.
because it's not just a moral issue like you're saying here. There's a lot of psychology that goes into this. I think a lot of people know it's wrong and it's not the best thing, and that a lot of these women that they're watching are being exploited, the men are being exploited, the younger ones are being exploited. um, there's girls who turn 18, start an OnlyFans, and then they're making millions of dollars overnight. Kinda shows you exactly where our society's at.
Mhm.
There's too many case studies at that exact thing, but, um, when it comes to, like, the recovery aspect of this, um, because there is hope, right? There is a lot of hope, but, filters recovery requires relationship, not just restriction.
Mhm.
And, our society doesn't help with this, with creating virtual reality, which you can put on a headset and be doing who knows what. I have a VR, but I barely use it. Um, and stuff, but there's so much access, right? There's so much access. There's access on social media. There's access on all these different platforms. Like, it's everywhere. Like, you can't avoid it. You can try, but you can't. So filters help, but they're not really enough.
Mhm.
And so what do either kids or like, it's kind of a two-part question. What do kids and men, it's gonna be 2 different approaches here, but what do they need once the porn or the addiction has entered the picture?
Here's the truth. On the subject of filters, and then we'll get into, what really helps.
Mhm.
Filters are going to do their job, right? Blockers are gonna do their job. Whatever you happen to install on your devices, they're there to do a job, and they're going to do it. At the end of the day, the best filter that anyone is ever going to have is going to be themselves. It's going to be their own intuition and their own sense of wherewithal, right? The filter is going to do their job. We still have to do ours. So you might be like, all right, cool, Chris. What does that actually mean? God bless you.
Thank you.
What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? What this whole culture of curiosity mindset that I talk about, again, the whole exercise is what's going on internally to the point where it's affecting me externally, to the point where it's driving my decision making. So, just to give an example, in a culture in many ways that, again, certainly rewards and will put money behind that sense of immediacy, that sense of immediate validation, that pursuit of happiness, right? Let me just get happy. Let me grab this, grab that, do this, do that. It's kind of like sugar. It's kind of like caffeine, just on the sense of it will give you that spark, but then it wanes. And then there's that crash. And then before you know it, there you are seeking and pursuing that next spark of happiness, when truly recovery comes into play, where the target becomes not your happiness, but to reinstate that sense of innate joy. And I know that might sound a little over the top, a little woo woo, but it's that sense of joy, which means It's that sense of contentment that's not dependent upon a stimulus, that's not dependent upon another person or circumstance. There is simply you being you. Now, that is a whole process. That's what we're trying to ease up. That's what we're
Mhm.
trying to reinstill. That's what we're trying to reboot. So how do you do that? While there might be over time like new blockages internally, whether they're coming in traumatic experiences, whether they come in the form of limiting beliefs, whether they come in the form of shame, like a lot of it is dusting out like the cobwebs to get back to that original thing. And one exercise that I have clients, both like, men in their, 20s, 30s, 40s and above, 2 children. It's a really, really flexible tool, but it comes from, like the internal family systems approach. I call it dialoguing. And there's many names for it, but I got this idea from a brilliant book called Brick in the Cycle. The author's name is George Collins, and I lead like a weekly coaching session on it in the program, the other program that I have. But for now, how it works is this. It's a journaling exercise. And for someone who loves to journal, I love this. What you do is you literally script out a conversation between yourself and, as George Collins would call, a subpersonality. Now, basically, that could be an urge, right, to act out, or even something more specific, like a thought pattern or feeling. You can have a conversation with your anxious part of you. If you're experiencing a depressive state, you can have a conversation with it. You separate yourself from it, not from a sense of like suppression or like, let me numb it out, let me do something or distract myself from it. You're really kind of separating yourself from it from a sense of compassion. So let's break it down. You, in this scripted out conversation, right? It's you write something out and then you write something from the perspective of that urge or that thought pattern. So, for example, like I would say, Chris, and I'll write something and then addict Chris, just making it up,
Gotcha.
like writing from that perspective. And you let that conversation go on for as long as it needs to. And what do you do just in that one example? You separate yourself from it. But again, just in that one example, you prove you are not it and it is not you, right? It's a separate thing. It's just a part of your nervous system that's trying to be processed. It's trying to get your attention. It's for those that might be, oh, I don't know how to get in touch with my emotions, or I feel strange about, this overall concept. Think of it like this. Let's say you get home from, and I say this to clients all the time, but let's say you get home from a long day of work, right? Or a long day of school, perhaps, plop down on the couch, long day, you finally just chill. And then immediately you hear the doorbell ring and you're just like, not now. I'm just trying to chill. Get up, go to the door, see who it is. You open up the door, and it's somebody that you're not exactly a fan of. Whoever just popped into your brain, that's who's at the door right now. It could be a family member, coworker, someone at school, right? They're at the door. Now, in this situation, you got,
I swear to goodness, if it was a coworker that followed me home, I
yep,
would I would I'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing here?"
there's confusion. What the fuck are you doing here? Like, what's going on? Now, you got two different scenarios. You got two different options. You can either, like, ugh, slam the door in their face, get out of here, or invite them in at least for a little while and ask
No,
why you came
the
to
only
visit.
option is slamming the door and turning around.
Well, when it comes to dialoguing, you
Yeah, no,
give yourself.
I know what you mean, I know what you mean.
I know, I know. But here's the thing. You let it say its piece, why it came to visit you at all, what it wants from you.
Mhm.
But because it's your house, you have the final say to when it's time for them to leave. So you put the power back in your hands. You remind yourself that, like, hey, despite what I might be feeling, despite my circumstances, I always have a choice. So that's the overall lesson and the overarching theme. A lot of the things that we talk about, 'cause like we said, bro, it's not the thing, it's the place from which it's coming from. When you get curious about that and start making decisions based on your own awareness, not just of what's going on trends wise, not the cultural expectations, but who you are, that's how, an individual starts to heal.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that because you have to get to the root, right? You have to get to the root. You have to get to the root of the issue. Much like I talked about in previous episodes, I've talked about this plenty of times. Like we have to get to the root. We have to know the why, right? You have to know what's fueling that fire essentially. So you can
Mhm.
put it out. If you're taking water to an oil fire, or grease fire, it's not gonna work out. But if you know that the fire was caused by grease, then you can take the baking soda or the flour or something, right? You take something going to be more effective, not spread it. If it's just a regular fire started with wood, you could pee on that thing if you really needed to and get it out, right? You have different options. You know what to do with different kinds of fires. Um, at least I hope everyone knows that. If you didn't know that, you just learned something today. Um, Grease fires do not use water. But again, it's one of those things, like, once you know, like, where it's coming from and you know exactly how to put out said fire, it's gonna be more successful at putting it out, or at least controlling it a little bit better and finding better ways to control it. So it kinda all goes back to connection with self, right? A self connection regulates behavior better than control. Because you can control it, you can filter it, but you still have to be able to regulate it and connect with yourself and understand where it's coming from. Um, is there anything that parents do with, like, good intentions that actually makes their, like, recovery harder, or even for men that makes the recovery harder?
Introducing the topic with a sense of shame. And I know that word has come up often in this
Yeah.
conversation, but particularly for dads. I mean, let's be real. It might feel like a different flavor of awkward because odds are we may have had a history of, porn exposure in our own lives. So we don't, of course, the last thing we want to do is fall into that pattern of, do as I say, not as I do.
Mhm,
Right. Because that's not authentic. Like that's not leading from a place of, you know, authenticity, right?
mhm.
So, yeah, because here's the thing too. This particular generation, because I don't wanna be, just kinda give some general notes, right? We're really talking about a generation that is yearning for that sense of authenticity. Because like we were talking about, here we are in the sense or in the age rather of AI, in the age of quote unquote "fake news." Like, what is real? What isn't? It's like, the moment something happens, like we just had a Super Bowl, right? And now all of a sudden there's a think piece. Like the minute after it's over, it's like we can't just like let things linger. It's everything's immediate. There's this
Yeah, we
expectation
gotta start
that
talking about the commercials, we gotta start talking about the halftime show, we gotta start talking about the messaging, we gotta start talking about the players, the athletes, the
right.
stories, the everything, every little microcosm we have to start talking about. It's like, as a Seahawks fan, I can't even sit back and enjoy it that we won.
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, well, the Patriots are oh, well, they had the oh, this detail, oh, this detail, oh, this." It's like, dude, it's just they won a game, they won a big game, they were supposed to win, they were supposed to finish 4th in the division, they won. Let's just
Yeah.
enjoy it. We had a g That was a good game, it wasn't a terrible game, but it was a good game, right? The commercials were odd because they were all AI and apps and
Yeah.
Pepsi, um, stealing the polar bears, but other than that, I mean, it was fine. The Super Bowl the halftime show was fine. Like, it's nothing to get outraged about. There's nothing to there's unneeded outrage, right? It's like, why are we raging against a Super Bowl halftime show? Like, we've never done it before, and we didn't do it when U2 was the halftime performer because they're white, but they're not American citizens. We didn't do it for Rihanna, she's not an American citizen, but we didn't rage against her.
Or
It's
Paul
like,
McCartney, he's talking about like he was singing a song about like freedom, but he's not an American
he's not
citizen
an
either.
American citizen either, right? It's like, why? Like, why are we doing this? It's like, it's all just crazy. And then you throw in the 3 million Epstein files, and then there was an Epstein commercial during the Super Bowl. Um, I don't know if anyone missed that, but there was a Epstein victims of Epstein came out and called out Pam Bondi, and it was a yeah. There's a whole thing, but yeah, there's so much going on, right? There's so much going on all at the same time. You don't know what's real. You don't know if you're even questioning to the point. Is there actually a society of elites that have controlled things for the whole time and they sacrifice babies and drink their blood? And it sounds crazy, right? But then
Right.
you think about it, it's like, well, maybe it's not so crazy after all.
So the only reason why I went in that direction is because we're talking about a generation that is being exposed to
Ex
all that
all
stuff
that, yeah.
again as their brains are still
Mhm.
developing for yearning for a sense of authenticity.
Yep.
Just give it to me straight. That's real.
Yeah.
So what do we do? It's funny because like there's an example that I give often that I used to share with my music students all the time because I used to like direct like the musicals and stuff like that. Sometimes like a student would be feeling like a little insecure about a song, maybe their voice is cracking, whatever. So I would say to them, okay, like you ever see a show like The Voice or American Idol or something, maybe like clips online. They're like, yeah. I was like, all right, cool. You ever see a clip of somebody or maybe somebody in person? who is singing a song. They're on stage, they're doing their thing, and all of a sudden they just start just breaking down crying, just sobbing. And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I've seen that." And they're like, "Now, what is the audience doing? Are they just like, boo?" Because for all intents and purposes, like when they're like sobbing while singing, they're not really sounding all that good. You
No.
know, voice is cracking, they're strained, maybe they're forgetting their words, maybe they stop singing altogether. But why is the audience kind of like suddenly jumping out of their chairs and just applauding?
Mhm.
There's something about it. The lesson being, people would rather see something real than something perfect.
100%.
Let's think of a different example. Let's think any comedy movie ever. Anchorman, whatever.
Mhm.
The movie is hilarious enough, but then what after the end of a lot of these movies, what tends to happen? There's the blooper reel. You know, you got all these actors, you know, who are paid a lot of money to do this thing right, to make this movie happen, and then it's all of them like making mistakes and laughing it off and like being goofs, right? Why do
Mhm.
we love that so much? People would rather see something real than something perfect. So, how does this relate? That sense of authenticity. You know, you can share as much as you deem appropriate. Again, my role is to never tell a parent how to be a parent. You know your child obviously way better than anyone else will. You speak to them how you see fit. But remember, this is a generational thing. They are yearning, they are hungry, they are parched for that sense of realness. Who can I depend on? What can I count on to be true? What can be my foundation no matter what? So keep it real, particularly if you're a dad. Be like, okay, I've seen this horror movie before. These are where the jump scares are. This is what to expect, right? So, I mean, with all that explanation intact, I mean, the moral is simple: keep it real. You know, just
Yeah.
listen. We don't we don't need to make this weird. It's something that exists. And the more we kind of lead with this sense of shame or stigma, the more the stigma is going to persist. The more we kind of sweep stuff under the rug, it's just going to stay there and kind of infect the air around us, you
Mhm.
know? So I know I completely just went off there, but it's
No, you're
really,
good.
really important. And that's really my heart behind this program, is that this doesn't need to be there's no minefield. You know, it's something that exists and we don't need to overhype it. And like it reminds me of this comedian that Chris D'Elia.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So he's very kind of bro comedy, like, whatever. But he has this one bit that I actually found like really fairly insightful. He was talking about, how he's never drank alcohol before, never even sipped it, just never did it. And the conversations he has with people was just like, really? Not even a little bit. And it was because of the way he was raised. Like his parents had like liquor in the house or whatever. And his parents were like, okay, like this is what this is. This is how it affects you. I don't want you doing it, but I can't necessarily stop you. So then he was just like, okay, like just give me rules so I can be naughty. Like, there's not a like this mysterious red light around it. It's just like, don't do this. And the natural reaction, this human thing, be like, it's just this is what this is. This is how it affects you. You are your own person. You can make your own decisions, but understand that this is what this is. And, you know, it's like, call it a penis, call it a vagina. Like, you
Mhm.
don't be like, okay, like, wash your pee pee. Like, don't
Yeah.
speak to them like, they're not intelligent, because they are. As soon as you think like a child's not paying attention or not listening, I mean, like a lot of leading, a lot of parenting, especially to our youngers, it's a lot of monkey see, monkey do. This is why we say children are sponges. They're watching and they want to know that they can depend on you. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, dad's going to keep it real with me, right? So keep it real. That's really just to tie with a bow again. That's the moral of the story.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, on that note, let's jump into the dad zone where we keep it real.
Word.
Is he gonna play? There goes. That transitioned. First question in the dad zone to keep it real. Does pineapple go on pizza?
It can, but it shouldn't.
Great answer. Who are three people, dead or alive, that you would invite over for a dinner party?
I would invite, oh my gosh. All right. I don't want to spend too much time. I would this might sound like a goofy answer. I would invite Jesus. Just to be like, if I had the opportunity just to sit down with a dude to be like, Man, what's it all about? Just to talk to him? Can you imagine?
Mhm.
So, turn my water into wine, why don't you? But, like, I would talk to this guy.
Yeah.
Um, I would invite, rest in peace, rest in power, Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park.
Love that.
Oh my gosh. That's one of those people who I remember exactly where I was when I got the news that he passed away. I'd love to have a conversation with him.
I
And my
would love
third
to know
person.
his I would love to know the links and what he knew about Epstein
Yeah,
because
there's that.
there's a connection there, there's a connection there.
But I would
They were
also,
working on that movie about child trafficking, and then all those dudes that were working on it, all the musicians have all
Chris
mysteriously
Cornell.
passed away, that's what I'm saying. Anyways, one more.
One more. I would love to speak to somebody like Kendrick Lamar. How do you do what you do? Your artistry, like, regardless of you like his music, it's just like everything has a purpose. So just to kind of get to know his mind, I'd love that
Yeah,
opportunity.
those great lyricists, him, Wayne, and just how like, what goes on in there that you can
Yeah.
just create, like, I give you a word and then you're gone
Yep.
after that. Like,
Yep.
man, just to create the level of creativity, how did you get yeah, no, I love that combo. Jesus, Bennington, and Kendrick Lamar.
Right.
You don't like music or something, do you? I'm just
I'm a fan. Yeah,
oh,
I've
I
heard of
could
it.
yeah, yeah, a couple times, I dabble. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a young dad, age 18 to 22, just starting out his fatherhood journey?
Perfection is a farce. Stop chasing it. I mean, if
Love
you
it.
learned anything from the last rant that I was on, keep it real. Like, this child is a gift, and the greatest gift you can give back is your presence.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's wrap this thing up. Let's put a bow on it. Your CTRA for the listeners, you guys at home, your takeaway from this episode. There's a lot you could take away from this episode, a ton. Most importantly, keep it real, but also porn thrives in secrecy, healing thrives in connection. So just remembering that is a huge takeaway from this. Reflection. Have you created a home where hard conversations feel safe? And that's your reflection, something to think about as you go about your week. And your action item from this week, because I need you guys to working on something. You got to be doing something. There's always a takeaway. This week, ask your child a low pressure question. What kind of stuff do kids your age see online that adults don't understand? And then
Mm.
listen without reacting and without shame. Just ask and listen. And then if you guys want a practical resource for navigating these conversations as a parent, check out the Rebooted Teen Parent Program at rebootedteen.com, REBOOTEDTEEN.com. That'll be linked in the show notes, of course, as always. Big thanks to you, Chris, for stepping into a hard but necessary conversation. Dads, your willingness to talk calmly and consistently matters more than you realize. If this episode helped, if it hit home for you, if it was like kind of an eye opener, any of the above, all the above, or some of the above, or none of the above, and something else, even in the comments, share it with another parent, subscribe, leave a review. All those little micro interactions do help. 5 stars, a review, a comment on YouTube, Apple, or YouTube, Spotify, a 5 star with a nice little comment on Apple definitely help. Wherever you're listening, whatever podcatcher you're on, Good Pods, wherever you're listening, make sure you do what you can to help and support the podcast. It really does help at the end of the day. And it's free. It costs you nothing but a couple extra seconds of your time. So it is appreciated. This is a Young Dad podcast. Oh, I'm your host, Jay. I hope you enjoyed your juice box. I hope you enjoyed your snack. Make sure you throw away that trash so your wife doesn't yell at you. And keep showing up for yourself, for your family, and most importantly, for our kiddos. Until next time, right here on the show.